The wonders of Adobe Photoshop.
Welcome. Masking in Photoshop plays a critical role by determining where in an image the effect of a layer will happen and can offer very precise regional control. So how does masking work? It works like this. When we have black on the mask, it hides the impact of that layer. White reveals the impact of the layer, and gray allows some impact. A lighter gray allows more of the impact than a darker gray does. So as example, down here in the bottom right, this brightness and contrast adjustment layer has a mask on it. As a matter of fact, all the adjustment layers, when we start them up, have a mask built in them automatically, and the mask is selected. This mask is all white, which means the action of this layer to brighten it and add a little contrast is applying everywhere in the image. If we were somehow able to paint black on this section of the mask, and we'd see that over here, then the adjustment that's happening on this layer would not be visible in this part of the image. We can do that by using our brush tool. So let's come over here and find it. There it is right there. Click on it. We need to paint black because I really don't want to see this contrast and brightening happening in the sky. To get black, we need to make the foreground color down over here in the bottom left black. So let's get a pure white and pure black by clicking right up there. And then let's make black the foreground by clicking on the switchy arrows. Now with my brush tool, when I click and paint, because this is outlined over here, the mask is outlined. When I paint, I'll be painting black on the mask. So I'll make the brush a bit bigger and let's just bring it through like this, something like that. Now we have black, a transition through grays to white. And if we toggle the view of this on, we'll see that the sky no longer has any adjustments from this particular layer. The sky has been masked off. So what can have a mask on it? Well, basically anything that we can put down here in the layers palette can have a mask put on it. So as example, if we open up a new layer, just an empty layer, nothing going on it, we can add, it does not come in with the mask automatically, but we can add one to it by hovering over this little icon down here. It's a square with a circle in the middle of it. We click on it, it adds a mask. If we decide to make a copy of the background, so if we have a pixelated layer like this and it's selected, when we click on the icon to add a mask, it'll add a mask. And the other thing we can put masks on over here are something called groups. A group is this little folder symbol. Folder symbol, if we click on it, we'll add a group to this equation here. We can add a mask by clicking on the mask symbol. Now we've got a mask on that group. Let's throw these away. So let's talk about the ways we can view the mask just a little better than seeing it over here in this little bitty thumbnail. If we hold the Alt key down, that's going to be Option for a Mac user, and then click on the thumbnail, we will display the mask in the workspace. And this is going to be very useful for us to really see what's going on. We can zoom in, make adjustments, and it's a lot more information to work with than trying to squint at this little thumbnail over here. I'm going to click on the eyeball out here to bring us back to the regular view. Another thing we can do is tap on the / key on the keyboard, and it brings up this view for the mask. And I don't know, this view I don't find useful. It's just too in my face. So I never use the /. One of the other things we can do is we see that this particular layer is being impacted down here in the foreground. But if I wanted to return and see if I liked the view of it being impacted globally, I want to disable the use of the mask. If I hold the Shift key down and click on the thumbnail, it'll basically say, no, we'll take the mask away, and the impact of the layer will be visible globally in the image. No, I do not like seeing that sky get that much brighter. So back to Shift and hold down and then click on the thumbnail. And now I'm actually seeing the mask is actually working again. It's not disabled. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the ways to create masks. And this is where the magic starts to happen. We can create masks based upon almost any criteria imaginable. So what does this mean? Well, we can create masks based upon the tonalities of an image. These are called luminosity masks. We can create masks based upon the colors in an image, either a specific color or the saturation level of color in an image. We can create masks based upon the depth within an image. We can create masks based upon selections made by the various selection tools. And we can create masks based upon certain features of an image, for example, the sky. Let's pretend that I didn't really like the way this mask here was created. We could throw it away. And then I want to put a new mask onto this layer. But I want the mask actually to have a better outline for the sky. We could run up here to select sky. And then when we click on the little symbol to add a mask, it'll apply a mask based upon that selection. So anytime we see marching ants like we just did, and then we create a mask, it will have a mask based upon those marching ants. But this, if we toggle the eyeball for the layer on and off, is brightening the sky, not the foreground. This is the exact opposite of what I want. So we have a way we can deal with that. It's called this little invert button up here. We can click on that, or we can use Control-I as a keyboard shortcut. That would be Command-I for the Mac people. I'll just click on this button right here to invert it. And now there is black in the sky and white in the foreground, which means the effect that I want to have happening in the foreground is staying in the foreground with much more precision than using that large brush. Let's say I suddenly decided that in this foreground, I wanted to make the shadows just a little bit darker. I really love this mask and I want to impact the same exact area. We can, as long as this is what's outlined over here, this mask is what's outlined, we can come up into the Properties tab, and this little marching ant symbol, if we click on it, it will reload and make a selection based upon the existing mask. So let's say I open up a curves adjustment layer, and let's just darken that foreground a little bit more. It's actually going to be the exact same mask, impacting the exact same area as the original mask. These two adjustments are quite powerful and I like the way they look, but let's just say I wanted to maybe not have the highlights in the foreground get quite as bright. I'm going to create a luminosity mask and then apply it to both of these two bottom layers, basically by putting them in a group and then putting a luminosity mask on the group. So let's see what that looks like. And again, what we're trying to do is show y'all that we can kind of do nested groups where we can slowly build a very fine-tuned mask or set of masks that allows the actions that we're working within our layers to apply to very specific levels, or pardon me, specific areas. Okay, so we've got these two selected. We'll click the little folder symbol to put them in a group. And then we're going to call up a luminosity mask. To do so, I'm going to press Control and the Alt key down. That's going to be Command Option for Mac, and simply press the number 2 up on the top number line. We get the marching ants. So again, we see marching ants. We know we've made a selection. If I ask for a mask to be created, it will be created based upon this selection. So let's click the little symbol to create a mask. And now I have a mask. We can see it right over here in the bottom right that is based upon luminosity. If I want to view this mask in greater detail, I'll hold the Alt key down. That's going to be Option for Mac. And I'll click on the thumbnail. And now this is the view of the mask. What this mask is telling us is the action of this group. So there's 2 layers in there. The combined action of this group is going to have a greater impact in the white areas and lesser impact in the dark areas. That's really not what I want. I wanted to basically hold this kind of brightening of these light areas back, allowing the impact to happen more in the darker areas. So I need to invert this mask. So let's go ahead and click the invert button. So now the brightest areas of the image, which is going to be, let's say, this top area right here and these areas here, now have some black on them, so the impact won't happen as much there. Let's toggle the view back on. Let's go back and fit onto screen here, and we'll see, yeah, the bright areas just don't get quite as bright. It's kind of a nice, subtle set of adjustments. We're calling this kind of nested because we already have the masks down here on the individual layers, keeping it out of the sky. Then this mask up here on the group is controlling where in the foreground it's actually happening based upon luminosity. Okay, once a mask has been created, then the other half of the masking magic can happen. And that's learning how to modify a mask once it's created. This means, how are we going to adjust the tonalities of the mask? So if we take a look at this one here, we basically have white and black. But let's say maybe we wanted a little bit of that adjustment to bleed through into the sky. Not a lot, just a little bit. We could take the density slider up here and move it back. We can see that now that black has gone a little bit less dark. This is a really nice adjustment. And it is an adjustment we can go back later on and go, well, I decided I don't like that. This will be saved in the layer information. So we can always go back and adjust it if we decide we want to fine tune it at some other time. It's very, very handy. Let's run that back up. The other thing we can do here is play around with the feathering if we wanted to impact feathering, which sometimes we do. If we see an abrupt edge, we don't like the way it looks, this would allow us to feather it. Another thing we can do is, let's do something like this. Let's display it in the workspace. I'm holding the Alt key down, Option for Mac users, and clicking on the thumbnail. When we look at it small, we can't see all the fine details. If we see these fine details here now, we'll zoom in a little bit here. It's not an abrupt line. It's a little bit feathered. It's not exactly maybe what we want. So when we make the mask display in the workspace, we can make some additional adjustments to it. So image, adjustments, and then over. And anything here that is not grayed out, we can actually use to make changes on the mask. Let's click on levels. And realistically, we'd like to see these very dark grays to go pure black. So let's just move those over until they go pure black. There we go. And then these light grays, we really would like to make them pretty much white, create more of an abrupt boundary. Still having a little bit of trouble up in the sky. We've got a bit of trouble there. All right, that's going to be about as good of a boundary as we're going to get right now. So we'll say okay. I didn't quite get this totally gone. Well, I can grab my brush tool. Black is still my foreground color. Use the left bracket key to shrink its size way down. I'm a little concerned that if I have a soft brush, it'll bleed over into the ridge line. So here we go. We'll go with a really hard brush. All right. We can continue to modify and work on this mask. Ooh, that right there is a little bit of a defect. I'm going to change the foreground color to white. And let's come in here and make that white. This looks reasonably good. Let's toggle this eyeball back on. Let's fit this back into screen. Click the magnifying glass tool, fit on screen. We've refined that mask a little bit ourselves. We've modified it in a very useful way. But what if I wanted to refine it just a little bit more? So let's zoom in here. There's this little button up here called Select and Mask. When we click on it, it gives us the ability to modify the mask in even additional ways. A little note to pay attention here is the view I'm on is on layers. I think it comes in on onion skin, and there's marching ants. There's all these different view modes, and I find this one to be the most useful. Not that I see a real problem we're going to see change with this, but one of these items that I find very useful is this ability to shift the edge. Honestly, it works really, really well when there's a real distinct change going on. Let's say a Milky Way is blending with a foreground taken at dusk. I find this to be very useful. About the only thing we need to do is shift the edge just a little bit. So shift edge does this. I'll pull it the wrong way. Made the problem worse. I'll go back to 0, and that's where it was. But if we go to the plus side, the problem through here just disappeared. In this particular case, it's not going to make noticeable difference, but this is a very useful tool with like a Milky Way image. The other thing we want to talk about in here is how it applies itself. So after you get done making your adjustment, just go ahead and scroll to the bottom. And when you click OK, it will be applied to that mask. There is one more thing here that is a possibility of working with, and that's this button here called Color Range. I don't really enjoy working with Color Range. It would impact the mask, but I just find this to be very coarse and unuseful. Again, you could make a selection based upon, when you come into here, you could make a selection based upon an individual color, any of these choices here, or sampled color where you come out and start making choices in here. Then it impacts the existing mask based upon your selections in here. But I find that this is coarse and not as useful as doing this nested procedure here where we put these in a group and then refine from there. I just feel like I've got more control doing it this way. Okay, so continuing on with our discussion on modifying masks, let's go ahead and fit this back in the screen. And let's go back up and work on this mask right here. Earlier, I showed you that you could hold the Alt key down, or the Option in the Mac world, click on the thumbnail, display it, and then come up to Image, Adjustments, and then make adjustments while you're looking at the mask itself. Well, we can also leave the view of the image in place. All right, so that's the adjustments that we're impacting here. We can leave the view in place as long as this mask is outlined. I could come up here to Image, Adjustments, and work on the mask. These adjustments are not going to be on the image. These adjustments are going to be on the mask. So let's say we wanted to make the mask generally darker, which means less of the adjustments happening here would be visible. We could simply grab and go down, and we should see the image sort of dull out, become less contrasty. If we wanted to make the image have a little bit more contrast that was offered down here, maxes out at what's offered down here, we could open it up a little bit more. And notice we're impacting this mask right here as we move around here. So what's really nice about this is this ability to have fine-tuned control. So I like doing this where I can work something real time and make an adjustment on the mask that I've created, just like this. Say okay. And now that's what we have for a mask now. So let's talk just a little bit about a potential bit of confusion that may happen in the future. We know when we're using one of these tools here that when we make a selection, we can see the marching ants. We know we're making a selection. Control Z, get rid of that. What happens, however, let's say we've got a different image and we're wanting to make, let's say, maybe a luminosity selection based on luminosity. We should be able to do that here because we have different tonalities. So if I hold the Control key down and the Alt key down, Command Option for Mac users, then I press the number 2, I should get marching ants indicating where my selection's being made. Instead, I get something that says, warning, no pixels are more than 50% selected. The selection edges will not be visible. That's okay, which just means that when I click OK, I'm not going to see marching ants, but a selection has still been made. And I can verify that by opening up a, let's open up an empty layer and add a mask to it. And that is the mask or the selection that was made. So even if you see that, you proceed forward, you're going to see that from time to time. Expanding upon that just slightly, let's hold the Control Option, that's Command Alt, press number 2 here to make a luminosity mask. Again, luminosity mask made this way, always start off grabbing the marching ants just a little bit brighter than middle tone, all the way to the highlights, but it does feather back. So that's what we would see. So if any of our pixels were darker than this line, which they were in the previous image, you're not going to see marching ants. It doesn't mean they aren't getting selected. We're just not going to see the marching ants. They have to be at least this bright before we see the marching ants. And again, if we open this up as and made a mask out of this selection, it's going to look just like that. Okay, that ends our sort of introductory discussion on masking. And we're going to start making several videos now where we make luminosity masks, color masks based upon color or saturation level, masks based upon depth within the image, and showing how we might use some of the other various selection tools to make masks. I'll see you next time.
Ooh, that was interesting.